All right, we appear to be live. Jeez, I'm just barely waking up. Why the hell did I decide to do this so early in the morning? Anyway, Adam aka CS Radical here, being a little half awake here as we're gonna go through the 2017 fall anime season as we just start this new year. I actually didn't really do anything this new year, which is kind of nice. For once, I decided not to go out and about and do all this crazy stuff. So it was kind of relaxing for once to actually go to bed at a half decent time, not having to deal with a bunch of crazy drunk people and driving all over the bloody place in crazy amounts of traffic because everybody else is trying to get out at the same time because now the New Year's over, and now everybody just wants to get home and go to sleep. Instead, just kind of sat, played video games online with a bunch of friends, and then just kind of shot the shit there. And when it was New Year's, a little bit of celebration and then bedtime. Nothing too special. Anime wise, this season actually pretty good. All things considered, like I dropped maybe as I'm looking at my list here, I dropped 7 shows, kept in the end 8. It was a pretty sure you drop half of the shows you watch, but I mean at the same time I dropped shows that I was pretty sure I was going to drop, but I had to give a shot. There was really only 2 that I was surprised to drop. Everything else kind of ended up being what I thought it was. So we're going to go through the same format as we did last year, or not last year. Well, I guess technically last year, wouldn't it be? I'm going to go through the drop stuff first, and then go through the full reviews of the shows that I did keep, and then we'll do our awards. Obviously, for those after watching last year, they're like, "Where's all the imagery?" I don't have time to edit for like 2 to 3 hours going through all the imagery and pasting all that in, having to listen through the podcast to get that key section where I have to, because obviously I can't just figure out, oh yeah, it was 43-44 that I switched shows on this thing. I can't be bothered to do that stuff, and I don't have the same amount of time a few months ago that I do now, where I can't sit down for 4 hours and go through all this stuff. So this is the easiest format for me to do this content. It's just going to be an hour to an hour and a half straight, and then YouTube will take care of the rest for me, which is it is a bit lazy, but at the very least, I can get the stuff out, and once I can free up some time again, I can try to do things properly. Actually, I was going to do this on OBS and do it on my own with at least like a main image to go over rather than just Google Hangouts doing this. And OBS apparently doesn't like my computer, so that option got taken away as well. So I'm trying to find easier ways around it, and it just ain't working. So this is the current format for the time being. So we'll work with that for now and figure out what to do from there. I was hoping to also have people on, but no one bit. I tried going through a couple of friends, see if they wanted to come on. They didn't have the time, nor really were that interested. So it's like, whatever, I'll go solo for another season. So starting with the drop list, I'm going to go in alphabetical order like I usually do. Anime Guitaris is the first one on the list. That one was a show that I was 50-50 on when I took it. I kind of figured it was going to be a show that could have been kind of fun, but I felt like it was going to end up being a little bit too marred in the club activities rather than just being the silly stuff that I was kind of hoping that I'd see. Like, there were moments of brilliance in that show, and then at times it just kept just smacking me, being like, this isn't quite what you're looking for. And that pretty much fell into place when you had the constant story going on between the student council and the club itself, where for whatever reason, and I never got far enough to really understand why, the student council just apparently doesn't like anime. I guess I wonder if this show takes place in a pastime where anime was even further looked at as like this really disgusting, like deplorable thing. I mean, I don't know what it's viewed as in Japan, but it seems like it's big enough in Japan that maybe people have relaxed a little bit, but who knows? But that part of the story it wasn't interesting. I couldn't get into it. The council, they were, I guess you could say they were doing their job as villains, but at the same time, they were doing a horrendous job at being like interesting villains. It was just more like, oh, these fucking guys again. So otherwise, nothing really grabbed me too heavy. Like, there were a couple episodes that were good, and then just everything else was just mediocre at best. And after a while, I gave it enough chances where it was like, you know what? I can't do it. Speaking of shows, though, that I gave one chance and blew it significantly, And this is a show, this is probably the show that everybody's like, oh man, I love this show. You know, how could anybody not like this show? Black Clover. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it last year or last season fell into that case. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it at some point with other shows. Shonen just ain't my jam. I've tried and tried and tried, and those shows just do not work with me. I don't know why. I can't really quantify it. It's just those shows, for whatever reason, just they don't do anything for me. And I thought initially that it was going to be, it might have had at least, you know, staying power for a couple episodes just to see where it was going. But I got to tell you, and I don't understand anybody who can even watch this show. The main character is just such an annoying piece of shit. I cannot stand the voice. The fact that I made it through the entire episode alone is amazing enough as it is, when that main character is just as obnoxiously loud as you can possibly get. And even then, the show itself, like, none of the characters were really that interesting. The entire story of he's the one person that apparently can't wield magic, and yet he gets this crazy cool power. It's like, oh my god. I think that's probably one of the few things I can figure that maybe that's why I don't like shonen shows, is because the concepts behind them are just so stupid. As a guy who's a pro wrestling fan, it really does seem like every kind of shonen anime there is out there is basically trying to be like Roman Reigns, the anime, where it's the guy really is an underdog, except he is completely overpowered and can do all these things eventually as time goes on. It's like, no, that's not interesting. I don't find that interesting at all. I don't find that kind of story interesting at all. And that show was the kind of thing that's like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not watching this anymore. It just didn't fly. First of two disappointments, Desiree. I was looking forward to the show probably more than anything at that point, because this is a show that had taken a long time to make. It's this long story of getting, you know, everything together, getting a cast together, getting a group together just to produce the thing. And initially it seemed like it was going to go well, because I figured, okay, you know, after watching the episode 0 and then episode 1 and just getting on to an idea of what's going on, I'm thinking, okay, so it's going to be like Hellsing, but, you know, a little sexier, a little more, I guess, not as bloody in a way, because Hellsing just kind of was more like a badass bloody, whereas I think Desiree was trying to be a little more like comical in its ways. And it did okay for a few episodes, and then after a while I'm just like, wow, this is all you got. This is it. This is everything you have. You've already put your cards on the table after like 2-3 episodes, and you've got nothing. The story was completely stupid. It started making zero sense, and even the action sequences, while they were still kind of cool, like, they weren't really doing anything. The main character is a pain in the ass, just like Black Clover, although voice was not the problem in Desiree. The guy was just completely unlikable. The girl next to him, same kind of deal. Not that easy to get into. In fact, I was more interested in a couple of the Nazi girls than anything else. Like that's how bad the main cast was, is that they were making me like Nazi villains more than the actual cast that we're supposed to be cheering for. And as time grew on, I'm just like, there's nothing here anymore. They've already played their hand, and they have nothing else. They're already out. So they were gone. Sengoku Nightblood is next. That one was the same kind of deal with shonen. I'm not too big on shoujo shows, and that one really didn't offer anything to me. I basically looked at it, I'm like, so it's just cute boys. Okay. That's all you got? All right, I got nothing to say to you. Nothing really caught me. Like, the story, whatever story there was there, I've kind of forgotten most of it because I dropped that week 1 and there really wasn't anything memorable about it. I think that's probably the biggest slight I can give it, is that there just wasn't anything memorable at all about the show. I mean, it looked kind of nice graphically, but I mean, it's got to be more than looks. And people are being like, well, you watch shows that are just cute girls doing cute things. I'm like, yeah, but at least they're funny. At least they offer something. That show, like, I didn't laugh at anything. There wasn't anybody who intrigued me. Like, oh, we'll get to Code Realize later as one of the shows I finished. That show is a shoujo show that actually managed to keep my attention regardless of how it ended. But yeah, Sengoku just, it didn't do a thing. I basically watched an episode and was like, okay, well, that was a waste of 30 minutes. And that was it. And now we get to probably the most fun show that I dropped. Shokugeki no Soma Sanosara, the third season of Food Wars. I did say when I dropped it, I think it would have been episode 9 or 10, that I said, I'm still going to keep up with it and come back to it when it's good again. Because the problem that I have with it is the arc, and I'll get into it in a sec. But in all honesty, I have not caught up on the show. I think I'm down 2-3 episodes, and I just haven't had the urge to watch it, which is kind of frightening to me because I really, really like that show. And I still kind of do. But the arc in this season, I don't know. I was begging people to tell me over Twitter, like, please tell me that this gets better. And it didn't. It just continued to not get better. The season started off fantastically. Everybody was back. People were working together. Somo now had a new challenge. I figured, okay, he's trying to get into the Elite 10. Okay, cool. I can understand that. He wants to be up. He wants to be the best. So of course he would shoot for that. And it starts off just as you'd expect. He's going not essentially one-on-one in a Shokugeki, but basically he's running a restaurant aside Kuga, who is one of the Elite 10. I believe he was seat number 9, if I remember correctly. And that's all he was trying to do. He was trying to get more sales in his restaurant than Kuga's. And it was a matter of him slowly having to learn how to be a proper chef and be able to adapt rather than to just, make something on the fly. Like, because Soma's always been the same way. He's so just out of a whim, he just goes and does something, and he's such aloof. And that's why we like him, because he's cooking Goku. He just wants to cook. He wants to beat people. Not literally. He just wants to beat people with his cooking. And in this smaller section of the show, like the early parts of the show, it was doing exactly what I was kind of hoping for, to be able to get away from the tournament stuff and just have them doing silly things and cooking, and Soma trying to overcome stuff and other people learning other things. Because we saw Alice and oh my god, what's the guy's name? The curry spice guy. I can't think of his name. Was it Akira? Maybe I might be wrong on that, but those two are working together. Everybody's doing something to improve, and then all of a sudden, Erina's dad shows up, and that's when everything completely loses all interest to me. He has really, really dangerous heat with me, and it's not the kind of heat that you want to see him get his comeuppance. It's more like, why the hell are you on my television screen? Get the hell off of it. And that's kind of where I stood. I thought initially, okay, this guy's kind of interesting. He's a bit of an asshole. Okay, cool. I can get with that. And then when he took over the school, I'm like, wait, so we're going to take away all of the things that made the show interesting. We're taking away, people being able to be free to do what they want. They're trying to take away the Shokugeki, and that ended up backfiring. They're trying to take away Polar Star, which, yeah, granted, they saved it, but still the ridiculousness of it. It's like, oh yeah, we're just going to take away all the clubs. And it's like, so you're trying to make like a dictatorship of a food school. And I'm like, why do I suddenly not have any interest in what you're talking about? Because again, sure, the villain's doing a really stupid, fucking dangerous, evil thing, but it's not fun to watch. And those few episodes where it really kicked in, like I was just screaming and boiling at just the seams, because I'm like, oh my god, this is so frustrating to watch, because nothing cool is happening, nothing fun is happening. And the entirety of the show to me has been a fun show, and they've taken the fun out. And with the Shokugeki that Soma had with another one of the Elite 10, the I guess the guy who's really good at the business side, that was about the point that I'm like, okay, maybe they're trying to get better. And then it was just right back to, okay, all these clubs are getting disbanded because they're losing. And it's like, okay, well, you've lost me. I'll come back and talk about you when the show gets better. And that was the claim that I made. I'm like, I don't feel like giving the show time because I don't feel it deserves it, because it's basically smacking their fans in the face. Now, I know this is probably something that's already finished in the manga, and I just don't care. For me personally, I feel slighted by the show because of what it's done. It made the show not fun for me to watch. And whenever a show that I am intending to watch to smile is now making me angry, it's really hard to justify watching that show. And at the very least, in the case of how I treated Food Wars, I just didn't want to talk about it anymore until we got to this point where I could just kind of go through it one more time. But yeah, I have not been watching the show. And I kind of hope I can get the urge to go back and at least catch up, but who knows? Because right now the urge just isn't there. We got two left. Two car. This one pretty simple. I thought it was going to be possibly like Bakuan, and it just isn't funny. There's just nothing going with that show. It's very, very blank. There's nothing there. It's just a bunch of girls in racing suits, and that's it. There really isn't anything too interesting. So unless you're into car shows where there is the driving stuff, which I'm not too big on because I've always haven't had. Excuse me. I've always have not had much of a thing for anything sport related. So a show like this just it didn't fly. I can't really say much more. There wasn't anybody interesting, and there really wasn't anything to speak of other than I guess the driving, which wasn't something that I was attracted to in the first place. And then last but not least, Urahara. That show I didn't mind. I had the hardest time talking about it because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And in the sense of like there are shows that I watch that I have no clue what's going on, but at least I can kind of stay grounded. And in Urahara, I just couldn't do it. It was the kind of show that I didn't necessarily not want to watch. It was just like, I don't know. I don't feel like trying to talk about a show that I can't really talk about myself without any sort of clarity. And the show could have saved itself by being a lot better than what it was. It was pretty average. Like, the characters were all right. The art style was really unique. That was what it really had going for it. But everything else was just like, it's just really trippy anime bullshit, and there's nothing I'm really clinging on to. So that's why I'm dropped it. It wasn't because it was a bad show per se. It just there wasn't anything for me to cling on to, and any reason for me to be able to talk about it, with any sort of clarity and interest, because I was more just sitting there flabbergasted as I watched it. All right, water time. The downside of doing a solo show. Anyway, so let's start reviewing shows. Right off the top, Blend S. What can I not say about this show? I already spoiled it in my week 12 blog post where I straight up said this is the show of the year because there's no show I've enjoyed more, possibly this entire year. Blend S is essentially what you get if you take the working or Wagnaria format and then just really going balls to the wall crazy anime bullshit on it, because every single waitress in that show was a specific trope. Obviously, Micah being like the one who just has the really crazy eyes that scare the crap out of everybody. Kaho is the tsundere because you can't do anime without tsundere. Mafuyu is the Imuto, which is an odd thing for her because she's the oldest out of the bunch, I think. And she's still the one that acts like the little sister trope because, she's tiny. Of course you would believe that. Miyu, which is... This was the character that was a little weird because it seemed like she's like almost dominatrix, but yet her character was like the big sister. And I'm like, is there something I'm missing about the big sister trope? Because I don't feel like I see that often. But, she was the weakest out of the bunch easily, but she also still had her moments. And then last, of course, there's Hidari, which is the idol, which you would think, okay, so she's just going to be like this basic, really over happy-go-lucky girl who just wants to be able to sing in front of people. Nope. Fooled you. It's a trap. And Hidari may actually be one of my favorite characters this season. I think what Blend S really does well is that it takes all of these ridiculous tropes and doesn't get lost in the shuffle. No one gets lost. Like, there are episodes where people just don't really have a joke in there. Like, there are episodes where you wouldn't really see Mafuyu or Miyu or Hidari. I think Kaho and Micah were always consistent. But I mean, generally speaking, obviously Micah was the center of attention, so she was going to be in every episode. But there are some episodes where not everybody was there. Didn't really mind it though, because the episodes were still really funny. I think the worst score I gave an episode this season was a 3.5 out of 5, which is still pretty good. But there's really not too much bad I can say about the show as a whole. Like, the characters are all really good. Like, Micah is fantastic. Mafuyu is great in her moments. Kaho is, as a tsundere, you always got to take it with a grain of salt because some of the stuff just ends up being like really blatantly like fake. And then Hidari just kicks ass. The side characters, obviously, Dino does his job as being the guy who gets nosebleeds every 5 seconds. And then, oh my god, I'm forgetting his name now. Who's the green haired fucking cook? I can't think of what his name is. But he just does his job as the guy who's angry all the time. He's just the pissy guy. And it works. Like they all meld together perfectly. And no episode really takes a second away to be like, oh, we're gonna be really sad, or we're gonna take away, as like, you know what? I'll just say it. There's nobody that we know that has a dead parent in this fucking show. So they don't try to bring it up. It's like, oh, here's some depressing stuff. The show's just like, nope. 12 episodes of crazy hijinks. That's all we are. That's all we want to be. And I'm like, good. I can deal with that. So yeah, love that show to death. Like I said, it's going to be show of the year it might even be show of 2017 for me. It's really good. But anyway, to give a score to that in total, I gave that a 5 stars. Obviously, are there some episodes that weren't perfect? Of course there are, but you'd be hard pressed to find an anime that isn't like that. And what Blendes did is there was no show that I was looking forward to all season. There was no show that I enjoyed more all season. Everything worked for that show, and I loved every second of it. Okay, next up, Code Realize. This one is one of the biggest examples of why I know I struggle with shoujo. Obviously, as a male, shoujo shows are not exactly built for me. But at the same time, it's like there are shows that I watch, like say Erased, for example. I'm not very big on serious mystery anime, and Erased is still one of my favorite shows. So there's always things that bug the trend, and I thought for a while Code Realize was going to be that one. I did finish it, but I kind of forced it in the last couple of episodes. Were fantastic. It was working perfectly. Interesting in their own right. Cardia being, I guess, the weakest, but at the same time, she has an aura of mystery about her. Oh my god, why am I forgetting so many names right now? Lupin, who is just, your classic like gentleman thief character who's just like, I'm gonna steal your hearts. Probably both literally and metaphorically. The mechanic who, again, like I don't know why I'm forgetting names right now. Mechanic was really funny. He was always like the bright spot in every episode, because I don't think we ever saw the guy like really that upset. Helsing was pretty cool. Obviously, just any guy with double barrel or double shotguns, it's like, yeah, I'm down. And even Baby Drac was cool. The only real weak one I think was Dr. Frankenstein, which was like, he wasn't really anything too special. And even then, when they gave him his backstory and all this stuff, it's like, nah, you're still the boring one. Because that was the weird thing about this show, is that all the characters were kind of based on people, I guess. I don't know about every character, but there was kind of that sense. I mean, hell, there was a Sherlock Holmes character that was called Herlock Sholmes. I'm like, okay. But yeah, you had Frankenstein, you had you had Dracula in the form of who I call Baby Drac, this very, very young Dracula. And I can't remember what they called their family name, but they were very clever in how I think it was Delacroix. Yeah, it was Delacroix. I'm like, that's pretty clever. I know you had Queen Elizabeth in there. So I mean, there was a lot of historical names, or at least historical fictional names too. So it was interesting. And the show itself for 6 episodes was relatively fun. Like there were a lot of little hijinks. The missions were kind of cool that they went through. The fighting was pretty nice. The intrigue of all the characters. And then once we really got to the villains like showing their hand, aka like Phoenix just being a doll and Cardia being a doll, and it's like, oh, so these people don't matter now. Oh shit. So 2 things really happened. The villains started moving forward, and they weren't interesting at all. Phoenix wasn't interesting, and obviously them pulling the rug out and just being like, oh yeah, the dad is who put himself in this fucking spherical time thing. He's the real villain. And I hate it when shows do that. I hate it when games do it. I don't like last second villains. It just isn't fun. It doesn't give you a chance to want to see comeuppance. It's just like, oh, that's the guy. Oh, I mean, guess kill him, do it. Okay. And then the second part was just it just suddenly get really depressing and just kept getting depressing. Because Cardia is now this test tube baby, and it's like, so what's the point? Their lives really don't matter. And even then, like there was an episode where they kill off an innocent mother just because Cardia's poison starts emanating in a small area. And it's like, so we're killing innocent people just to reinforce that she's a monster. And I'm like, that's not an interesting dialogue to me. And it didn't stick. And by about 7 or 8, I think episode wise, it just kept going down and down. And I kept looking at it thinking, I really want to drop this. I really want to fucking drop this. But it wasn't so bad that I had reasons to really drop it. It was just like, oh my God, you guys are doing so good. Why are you screwing this up? Like, I wanted to see it get better. And it just continued to not do so. And by the end, the villains, again, just didn't matter. And when it was over, it didn't matter. And, you know, like I've said, this is a spoiler kind of anime. They just kill off Fetus. You know, when they have the chance to redeem him, they're just like, nope, he still dies. It's like, well, that was a waste. And then because it's a shoujo show, I guess, the romance just was so campy. It's like, oh my God, this is like an 8-year-old girl watching a Disney princess movie. Like, this is what it felt like. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, seriously, do like middle-aged girls actually, like, do girls in their late teens and 20s actually watch this stuff still and think it's legit? Like, what the hell, dude? But yeah, like the show itself, I really wanted to like more. And it did a very good job early on of doing that. And it just fucked it up so royally. So in the end, I think I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I think I gave it a 5 out of 10 sort of deal. Because I could have given it higher, but because I legitimately said in the post, like if they fucked up Phoenix in that, or not Phoenix, Phoenix. If they kill him in this section, because I literally thought this in my head, if they actually kill him, even though Cardia saved him for a second, then, you know, I'm just dropping a point just out of principle for that. So it would have been a 3 stars. It would have been a 6, and just because they did such a stupid idea, and just, we know we got to kill him. We got to, because dead family has to be a thing in anime. 2 out of 5 stars, or 2.5 stars. Sorry. Anyway, to the one show that I haven't technically finished because it's not over, Garo Vanishing Line. I said Phoenix so much that I now have finishing line in my head. Garo was really good. Consistently good, just like Blend S was, but in a different light. It was very violent. It was very serious. There was some really depressing and like real moments in there that did get me a little bit. The moment where the city gets leveled and they actually had the balls to be like, yeah, no, we're going to focus for an episode on the actual grieving of random people in the city, because you don't just blow up a shit ton of buildings and nobody dies. Because that's the thing that I hate about a lot of movies and anime and games, where like you see cities crumble, but they never talk about the death toll. They never talk about the amount of people that would have been killed, would have been hurt in stuff like this, because we just assume, oh, you know, somehow everybody's alive, even though superheroes have flown through like 50 buildings and punching each other and destroying half the city. Nobody's dead, right? And that was something that always bugs me and still bugs me. This show, on the other hand, doesn't shy away from that, which I really appreciated. The show itself was really cool. Those were all fan-fucking-tastic. I liked every single character. There really isn't one of the main cast that I don't like. Like, Luke is probably the closest thing to the odd man out, but he's got more of that, like, kind of silent killer kind of vibe to him. So even then, I don't mind it. But Sword is always super funny, especially when, you know, he has to pray every time he sees a pair of big boobs, because, you know, what anime guy wouldn't? Gina was obviously fantastic. And the episode that she was in was great. And then when we finally got her as more of a mainstay now in the current episode line, I'm more than happy to see that. Sophie, even though she doesn't have anything really to add, she's just, you know, this little girl that's trying to find her brother. And even then, like, her personality shines in this show because she doesn't quit. She's really stubborn like that. And it works very well with the cast of characters that are like, dude, like, you can't be coming with us. The only thing that the show really doesn't have it for it right now is the villains, because even the Dark Knight, it's like, oh, okay, so we just killed the guy's mom. Okay. I mean, there's a revenge story there, but the villain himself isn't really that interesting. He's more of just like the, I'm evil, I have to kill everyone that isn't evil Like that's kind of his personality. So that's like the one weak spot. But generally speaking, the episode doesn't really dwell on that. It's more like an episodic, okay, this is the monster of the episode. And most of them are really interesting. There's a couple here and there that were like, I don't know how I feel, but generally speaking, every episode is good. And that's the kind of show that, I can't wait to see more of, as we get to the winter season where I'm assuming that it's going to just be a 2 season series for this. Because based on where they are now, like they're halfway to El Dorado. I'm pretty sure like the entirety of the second season is going to be them going through all this. And I'm interested to see where it goes. I gave the show, I believe, 4 stars, maybe 4.5. I can go either way. The show did a really good job of taking a horror concept that I'm usually not very good with and making it interesting enough that I can look past the gore. And even so, the gore in the show was not too bad. It wasn't like you're mostly just seeing people getting eaten whole, and you're not like seeing like bits and pieces being torn off. It's legit just they get gooped up and you just see a pool of blood. I'm like, okay, that's not too bad. So we go from violent to probably one of the most immature and sexualized show on the list. Imuto Sai Iriba I, or A Sister Is All You Need, and you know exactly where this is gonna go. At the second the title gets like that, you're thinking, oh boy, this is gonna be awkward. And sure enough, it was very, very awkward. This is a show that I said straight up, if you don't like edgy content, this is a show that you need to stay as far away from as you possibly can, because this is only for the faint of heart. And because I really don't care about that kind of sorry, I shouldn't say I don't care about that kind of content. It doesn't affect me. And it's not even because it's like some people be like, oh, it's just perversion, or it's just, oh, you just really want to see anime girls, naked or whatever. It's like, no, it's just because I find that with a lot of anime that falls into this category, they tend to be really funny. And I'm a comedy anime guy. And this show was indeed chock full of comedy. Everything that you could ask for in terms of that kind of into an ecchi comedy was here. Like, you had the absurdity of Itsuki and his little sister complex. You had Nayuta, who's just insistent that she had to be naked all the time and wanted to just constantly just ravage the main character, and said probably some of the most really censorable things in there. I'm like, holy crap, they're trying to get away with a lot here. They're really testing the water. I mean, you have the one guy who I really wish we'd seen more of, Setsuna, who is the multi-hair guy with the super killer abs, and I'm like, holy shit, dude. But you had him, obviously who has an obsession with drawing butts, so he's constantly trying to get at people and just have them strip so he can just draw their butt. It's just like, so much about the show is absurd to the point that it's like I can see a lot of people being uncomfortable watching it, and that's why I like it, because anything that really pushes the boundary, it does make it more interesting to someone like me who wants to see taboos being broken, who wants to see stuff being allowed more often, because I do live in a world right now where people are way too quick to censor. Now, what the show also does, though, surprisingly enough, is that it's actually really interesting in terms of relationships. There's a lot going on. Just to name a few, like Itsuki and Nayuta. Nayuta completely admits that she wants to not only marry him, but she wants to just fuck him all day and all night. Like that's all she wants. And eventually we see that Itsuki admits, like, not to Nayuta, but he admits that he is in love with her, but he kind of doesn't want to start a relationship with her because sister complex necessarily, but because he, as a writer, he wants to be at her level so that he isn't the guy that marries the hotshot young upstart author. He's trying to ride her coattails. He wants to be on an even level with her by the time that who is super into Itsuki as like the childhood friend character who is always trying to take care of him and try to keep him on the right path. And yet he doesn't seem to repeat that. Like he's not following through and kind of admitting any feelings for her. And as far as we know, he doesn't really have any. But who does is, oh my god, I'm forgetting his name now. The orange hair guy with glasses. You guys will know if you've watched the show. You know, the best friend of Itsuki. He's in the boat of he's interested in Miyako, and he's trying to push Itsuki to Nayata so that way Miyako can give up on him and he has a shot. So it's kind of this weird thing where like he knows that he's beaten, but he's still trying to win regardless. And then you still have Chihiro, who's the little brother who's actually female that somehow Itsuki can't figure out because, you know, every boy has a definable chest that, you know, when she's not wearing the right sweater that it doesn't hide, and then the kind of pants that she wears, it's like, really, how do you not know this guy's a girl? Are you so it's the one thing you got to laugh about those kind of shows is that anybody with a set of eyes can kind of figure out when these females looking like guys characters in animes exist, and yet the main character for whatever reason can't. It's kind of funny that way. But even then, like, we're kind of led to believe that Chihiro does have feelings for Itsuki, and Itsuki maybe even does like look at Chihiro as something more. It's just he doesn't know how much more that is. But the show does a really fantastic job at being really interesting despite having its very, very erotic and very immature and very downright like one step away from hentai version of things. And it's actually really impressive. I gave that show, you know what? I don't know what I actually gave it when I put the post. If I actually did give it a rating, I'm going to give it a 4.5 stars because that show was it far exceeded my expectations. After one episode, I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting to see how far it pushes the boundaries, and then it actually got interesting, which I was really surprised by. Kino no Tabi, The Beautiful World. This is a show that very much tested my mental fortitude at times. There were a couple of episodes in there that, holy crap, really hit me hard. The first episode just surprised me because I wasn't expecting to see a guy so brutally killed because of, you know, it being a country that allows murder. You're thinking, okay, so it's just going to be guys getting randomly shot and that stuff. No, that is not what happened. We also had other characters that were really interesting. I'm forgetting all of their names because I really just remember Kino and Hermes. I don't remember the other guy with the dog, and I think the dog was Shizu. I think that's what I got. And I don't remember what the guy's name or the little girl that they took with them. That episode too, where she was introduced, was really heavy. That one was a tough one. The other two episodes that really hit me were the I think it was the girl that ended up she just ended up being called Photo, if I remember correctly. How, like, you know, she was basically a slave and she watched as the entire, like, this horrendously violent family. You know, it really almost seemed like they were trying to take a look at what it was back in slavery days, like the really extreme slavery. And in the end, we basically watch her being broken, and we think she's going to get killed. Like, I'm figuring based on how the anime's gone at that point, that I'm like, yeah, she's going to die, and it's going to be really upsetting. But instead, like, what happens is, I guess there's these plants that they pick while they're on the mountain, and they end up being really poisonous. And she tries to stop them. Like, I think she does mention it, and they just don't care. They're like, oh, whatever, you're just trying to lie because you want more food or whatever. And they all die, including, like, the little boy who was actually going to shoot and kill this girl. Like, it was a really horrifying episode. That one really bugged me for a little bit. And then the last episode that really did that was the country that was supposed to be well known for not liking travelers, and then Kino gets there and they're really happy. And, you know, there's that one girl that she meets and they get along really good, and the parents are like, oh, could you please, like, maybe you should take her with you and teach her to be a traveler like everybody else. And as it turns out, it's because everybody knows that a volcano is going to erupt and completely engulf the town. And they've kind of just accepted their fate because they're like, well, maybe it's karma for how bad we've been, because they really were a country that just hated outsiders. And the little girl, we were led to believe that, you know, oh crap, she's just going to die with the rest. She just died with the rest of them because she didn't know. It turns out she did. And she's like, nope, I want to stay with my mom and dad and be with them forever. And that episode really, really hit hard, because it was so unexpected. Like, I figured, okay, maybe maybe somebody would come and like there'd be like an explosion or like some like attack in between the country or whatever. I wasn't expecting the volcano to just completely run over everything and just like they're gone. That's it. I'm like, holy crap. That one hit really hard. But all in all, that show was fantastic. I gave that one a 4.5 stars as well. Like it was just a couple of really, really memorable episodes away from being a perfect 5-star score. So close. There was a lot going for it, and then there were just a couple episodes that just it was like I think what really did it was that episode with the traveling country, and it was just so frustrating to watch because it's like really like this is just a country led by assholes who don't care about whose land they trample over. Because they just leave imprints everywhere. It's like, oh my god, these people are so frustrating to watch. But yeah, no, I got nothing else I can say at this show. So Konohana Kitan is next. A show that I thought again was going to end up being a one-trick pony because I figured, okay, it's a show with a lot of hot spring scenes. Okay, so it's going to be more like this. And as it turned out, Konohana actually has a lot going for it. The characters themselves are all very memorable. Satsuki is a fantastic. Yuzu is the crazy, Loof. You have oh my god, Sakura is the girl that just constantly chases the doll Okiku. And I'm trying to remember the pink hair. I think the pink hair girl was Ren, and I'm trying to remember now the tomboy that she's in love with, and I'm blanking right now. But either way, like there wasn't really a weak character in that show. Like there were just some characters that stayed out of sight for a little bit. Sakura was one of the main ones, but everybody really played a good part. There were a few episodes that were kind of weak, but at the same time, like there were just a lot of episodes that were just really nice to just sit down and just kind of relax. Like it was a very relaxing show. There was a lot of comedy in it as well. There were some really fun episodes in that, but there were also just some episodes that were really just nice and relaxing. Like there was the episode with the girl that what was it? What was it? She was like a rain weaver, like she was weaving clouds for the rain or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but that was just a really soothing episode. Like it was really nice compared to a lot of other shows I was watching that was either just bonkers or really violent or really explicit. That show itself, like, yeah, it could be explicit because there was a lot of hot springs scenes going on, but at the same time, the show was just it always knew when to reserve itself and to just be really nice to watch and not just, something truly memorable. It was just very sweet and very soothing. It was a show that I really enjoyed that way. Trying to think if there's anything else. I guess the only real slight I can give the show a lot for is that it goes out of its way to pretty much make sure that every character by the time the show's over, like at least in terms of the main cast, like everybody's got to cry apparently, especially Yuzu, who just has this thing that like apparently anything sets her off and she just starts bawling, and it's like, okay, I can do without all the endless crying over what ends up a lot of the time being not very much. So it gets a little frustrating in that sense, but otherwise the show itself is it's just fun. It's nice, relaxing, good slice of life kind of deal in a fantasy setting. It's just it doesn't do anything too good or too bad. It's right down the middle. I gave it a 4-star rating because it was a kind of show that I could just sit down and enjoy without having to, worry about laughing too hard or getting a little squeamish or, getting a little upset. It's just the kind of show that I could just turn my brain off and just let it just soak me. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to take a momentary break here because apparently I still have a leftover cold, so I'm just going to mute the mic for about 5 seconds here. I think this is the one downside of doing this live like I'm doing right now. It just means I can't edit stuff out, but it means it's a choice I made because I'm, albeit a little lazy, and I don't have the time to go through it. Anyway, we got 2 shows left. Net-juu no Susume. I can't remember what the translation was. I think it was I think it was an MMO neat thing. I can't remember, whatever. But that show, if there was any show this season that far exceeded my expectations, that was the one. Because I'm usually not into romantic comedy anime, or at the very least, like they just end up not being as interesting. And this show, I was on bated breath by about, I guess the halfway point, I was just like, oh my God, like just get to it. Just get over with it. Come on. And it kept pulling back. And you're just like, oh my God, just come on, let them be a thing. The show itself, like, what could you not like about a show that takes the MMO concept and you're thinking, oh, it's just gonna be another MMO anime. And in reality, it's completely unique from what we see from shows like Sword Art and Log Horizon and Overlord. Like there was no being trapped in the MMO game kind of deal. This was straight up, these are just people that play the game at home, and here's their story outside of it that kind of intertwines with what they do. So the gist of that story is that a woman who has just recently, I guess, quit her job. She decided she's just going to be a neat, which means she's just going to stay home and play video games all the time. And she takes up a new online MMO and starts making friends with a female avatar as she plays a male one, and just ends up really liking this character, having a lot of fun with it, and they start having a real kinship. And as it turns out, they run into each other in real life because that's how it works. You know, you play an MMO and everybody is pretty much lives in the same city and probably 5 minutes from you. They bump into each other for the first time. They have no clue. But because of this first meeting, they start intertwining a little bit. As it turns out, the girl happened to be an old coworker with the guy's best friend that he works with now. And this third guy starts inviting the girl into some some events together. They go, drinking and that kind of stuff. And because of it, you know, the main guy, he really fell for this girl, and he starts getting a little like, I guess jealous is the right word. It's very realistic in that he's like, oh no, this guy's going to take her away from me. I really like this girl. And as time goes on, he starts to think that, because of all the coincidences going on when they talk online on the MMO, that maybe, just maybe, this guy that he's playing with is actually this girl that he bumped into and is falling for. And everybody else slowly starts to become aware of what's happening. And eventually he finally just goes out and says it. We finally get to that point where he just admits who he is. He admits that he knows who she is. And that's when the show really hits its stride. It's a shame that it was only 10 episodes plus the OVA, because by episode 9, the show is at its best. The awkwardness of these two who, I guess, really don't have a lot of experience talking to those of the opposite sex. It seems like neither of them really ever dated. So there's also that mixture in there where Moriko, the girl, just has no social skills at that point. Like, she's just all over the place. Her brain is like, if it could literally have popped out of her head and started doing laps around the place and rolling around on the floor, it would have done that. Whereas Yuta, the guy, he's doing everything he can to not do anything stupid and failing every time. And it was just really adorable. Like, you really rooted for those two to get together. And while it seems like it's pretty much implied that they are, we never really get that true moment. They never kiss. They never really embrace. Like, it's more like they're now hanging together, having dinner together. They're together, but they're not quite at that point. But the show itself, I love to death. That one is a 4.5 stars. The only reason it's not 5 is because there were a couple of really weak episodes, and there were also some. It's just the frustration of it, because sometimes in shows like that where it's all about coincidence, there are some that you're just like, okay, come on, you're getting a little ridiculous and out of hand here. And in some cases, it did take away a little bit from the show, but I wouldn't let that discourage you from watching this show. If you're into a romance, if you're into comedy, if you're into a slice of life kind of deal, and if you can take the whole gaming stuff, this show is perfect. It far exceeded any expectations I had for it. And I'm glad that I stayed with it, because there were times that I'm like, yeah, this might not end up being anything good. It wasn't to the point I was ever in danger of dropping it, I think. But the show itself was just, it kept you engaged. It kept you interested. And I could go on about all the other characters, but in the interest of time, because I still haven't even gotten to the awards yet. But there's a lot to love. And I'm really glad that not only did I stick with it, but I really gave it a lot of time because it just did a fantastic job. Last on the list, going to be really short because it's a 2 minute short. Was Osake wa Fufu ni Nate Kara. Fuck. Japanese. Jesus. Um, it's as simple as it gets. You know, I might not do shorts again just because, or it's tough, especially when they're 2 minutes. Like there really wasn't much to digest into, and that show, while it is fantastic, it's really funny at times. There were episodes where I absolutely adored it, and I thought that it was so cute and so funny. And then there were episodes that I'm just like, well, that was 2 minutes. Okay, what do I do now? But the idea of it just being this really adorable couple where the guy worked as a bartender, he's kind of a stay-at-home husband, it almost seems. And his basically his sole job is to relieve Chisato, which is the girl, the wife in the situation. I'm assuming they're married. Like it's not really implied that they are. It's possible that it's just a living together kind of relationship. But she really likes alcohol and completely changed. Like she becomes almost if you guys remember Umaru-chan, she almost comes to become Umaru-esque when she starts drinking. Like the ponytail gets let down, the glasses come off. She starts having these crazy over the top, like super happy, like it's so good kind of facial expressions, and she becomes super funny. It's tough either way because I like Chisato on both sides. I really love the crazy, like half drunken, buzzed up Chisato who's just being silly. And then there's just the sober, normal version of her, which is really cute and really like she's very normal. Like she comes off as one of the more normal characters I've seen in anime in some time. And it made her like it gave her an edge on a lot of female characters at this season, which you'll discover sooner as we get to the awards. The entire series as a whole it wasn't amazing. Like it didn't leap out and just destroy, but it was really good when it lasted. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was really fun. It was good for what it was. It was funny at times. It was cute at times. And then there were episodes where it's like, it didn't do anything too crazy, but it was still very good. So we are now down to the awards. I'm going to run through these quickly because not only have I been going, I believe, for an hour at this point, I can't remember what time I hit start on this, and it doesn't really show me a timer on it, but it's almost noon. I need to get some water again because I'm pretty much running out here, and I'm also hungry because, I usually eat 20 minutes ago, and my stomach's like, dude, like, what the hell are you doing? So anyway, I'm going to kind of rush through these awards. I usually do like 5 nominees. I'm not doing it because, not even in the interest of time, I straight up decided not to do it this year because it's like, I'm not wasting all this time saying good things about it and then just to say one more good thing about the winner. So let's get right to it. Best OP, the best opening music was Blend S without a doubt. It's the only show that I watch the OP every single episode. Most of the time I'd skip them because in the interest of saving me an hour, or not an hour, a minute and a half of time, I would just skip through it. But that show's intro is so well crafted. The song is perfect. It fits perfectly. The animation is so good. You get everything that you need to know about that show in that minute and a half. You know every character, you know what their gimmick is, and you know exactly this is going to be a silly, over-the-top show, and you're going to love it because it's so bouncy and catchy and adorable, and you can't take your eyes off. And the song itself it matches perfectly. There's nothing they did wrong with that intro. It may even be like my favorite OP in terms of combining the song and the animation. There are better songs and there are better animations, but the package together is one of the best because it fits absolutely perfectly. So that's my winner there. Best art direction is going to go to Garo Vanishing Line because while there are shows that did really good as well, Konohana Kitan was very good. Urahara I even could have given it to just because of how goofy it was, but I try to keep it to shows that I finish. Garo is just the one that did the best with so little. I thought, making a horror anime very, very cool to look at, very stylish. It was very good. Everything, I really couldn't complain about much. Like the character designs are fantastic. The backdrops were very, I guess, very sci-fi fantasy mixed. And the battle scenes, they can be really crazy, but I think that's kind of the point. The frantic nature and the speed of the characters really sold it well when the style is so off the wall, fast and in your face. Like it fits so perfectly with the design of the show it was trying to go for. Best character design goes to net-juu no Susume. It was tough. I could have given it to Blend S. I could have given it to Emoto, but in the end, I gave it to net-juu just because of Moriko alone, because she sells that show better than anything else this season. She is the reason that I stayed with that show, because her facial expressions, her design, the way that she acted, the way that she looked, everything about her specifically sold me and kept me invested because I wanted to see her get what she was looking for, or even in the sense of get what she wasn't expecting to get. There are shows like Blend S that did character design specifically in terms of their outfits and their unique look. They did it better, but what in net-juu no Susume does for me is that it makes me like characters far more because of their personality emanating from the animation. Instead of me giving the award to what I usually do, a show that just really makes some incredibly unique characters and does a fantastic job with it. What this show does is it adds intrigue and interest into characters that you maybe wouldn't have been as interested in if they were just in a normal slice of life. This show really makes you care through the expression and the animation, which very few shows can do. They also win the award for best story because, well, it was one of the very few that had a good cohesive one. I mean, Garo you could have technically said there is one, but it's very episodic. Code Realize had a good story and then shit the bed. And I don't think I can really do anything else because Konani Kitan doesn't really have an overarching story. Blend S is just hijinks. Imuto kind of, but it's through relationships. They're not really stories. They're just relationships that are slowly developing. So net-juu no Susume having this full-on romance that slowly develops and all these twists and turns, the possibility of a triangle going on. There's a lot to really go through in that story that really makes it very, like, you can't take your eyes off it. You're almost annoyed that you have to wait another week to see if they actually get together. The only real nominee I guess I could put aside from it was Kino. But the problem with Kino, again, is that while they had easily some of the best arcs, they were also just one episode each. There was never a story that went all the way through to something. It was just one really good 20-minute story, and that was it. Whereas net-juu no Susume is able to do that over 10, essentially 11 episodes if you're counting the OVA, and does it to a point that I stayed with it regardless of it being a show that on the surface didn't seem like it was going to offer very much. Let's see. Next up, best comedy. Very easy to give to Blend S. I wanted to give it to Imuto at some point, and I thought they were going to, but Blend S just is able to do the wackiness better. Because what Imuto does with its comedy is it's very, and sometimes it does get a little bit too ridiculous, whereas Blend S is able to do it because you know that that's all the show is. It's just meant to be stupid, off the wall, just nonsensical stuff. And with the addition of characters that have all these gimmicks like Micah, like Mafuyu, like Hideri, you're able to get these group of characters together that mix together, create this unbelievable ball of comedy. There's really no character that wasn't funny. Every character had a gimmick that worked. Every character had really good jokes. And when I get to the best moment in a couple of awards, you'll understand exactly what I mean by that. But yeah, Blend S takes that easily. The most WTF award was very simple, being Imuto, because there were so many times where I'm like, oh my God, how did that not get censored? How is that being put on live television? Because some of the stuff that happens in that show, you're thinking, holy crap, how is this not being tabooed? If this was being released in the US, people would have had like torches going up to the building that created this project and would have just burned it to the ground with some of the stuff they get away with in Japan here. Whether it's Nayuta constantly insisting on making everything as sexual as possible. The fact that they took, like, you know what, if you want to watch any episode, watch the episode, I believe it was episode 11. It was either 10 or 11 where they play the board game Once Upon a Time. Watch that episode and watch the entire game in full, and you will completely understand why this wins that award. That's all I'll say. Please watch that episode. And if you have watched that episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The best ecchi, this one could have gone to almost any show. Like so many shows did a very good job. I think the reason that I'm going to give it to Konohana Kitan, because I could give it to Emoto for being so extreme. I could give it to Blend S because when it makes those moments count, it does a really good job with it. But I think I'll give it to Konohana because I think in terms of the overall quality, I think it's the best drawn, and I think it's the one that also just it isn't marred by either being ridiculous or to the point of Imuto, which is just downright uncomfortable at times. Whereas Konohana is just it's they work at a hot spring end. What do you think you're going to see? There's really no moment that isn't too extreme, and it does it very well. And again, because I did mention that Konohana was a very beautiful show initially, like you just add on to that where it's very well drawn, and every character really shines when they get put in that position. The hottest moment was well, that one seemed pretty explanatory when that happened. Imuto with Nayuta and Kaiko, where, you know, I guess when you are an author that needs to be able to see the human body to be able to identify what you're going to look at. And in Kaiko's case, where you just need to see every single female body that you can so you can draw it properly, you get those two in a room together. And I literally have it written on my WordPad document here as Nayuta and Kaiko, sweet Jesus. Because that moment in the episode in that episode is just like, oh dear, this is illegal, isn't it? It's pretty off the wall insane. It's again, like I said earlier, it's that kind of moment in the show where you're like, how the heck is this not 18 plus and being like made into not an anime? Because this seems like it's one step away from hentai, and it's kind of like, holy crap. But otherwise, there are other spots that I guess I could put in there, but that was just the one that easily stands out. Best moment, though, altogether, and that's where we come back to Blend S. The reason that the comedy is so good in that show is because it even takes back from other moments and uses that as another joke. They do call back so well. And the best example of this is when we finally get the dog, which Micah just calls Owner. Because, you know, why the hell not? Let's just emasculate Dino just a little bit more. And Dino has to take care of this dog. And the dog likes waking up really early in the morning to go for walks. And Dino, being the guy who likes to watch late night anime all the time, he doesn't want to get up that early. So the dog figures out his vice. And there's one morning where Dino just doesn't want to get up. And Owner goes up, grabs his favorite waifu action figurine. He just puts it down on the ground, and you just see him open his mouth and have his mouth like opened right on, like he's about to chomp off this figurine. And Dino just freaks out and just brushes up and everything. It's one of the very few moments actually this season where I like legit like burst out laughing, because what that did is it took something that you knew not only was just, it wasn't even just funny for the sake of being funny. It was funny because you knew how true it was, because you knew that was his favorite figure and how much that meant to him in his weird way of being, you know, the otaku that he is. The callback was perfect, and the way that it was shot was so well done. It worked as perfectly as you could have ever asked it to work. Best couple or duo usually ends up being best couples, because duos just do not mesh as perfectly as romantic couples do. And in this case, it's almost a given that you have to award that to Moriko and Yuta from net-juu no Susume, because it was the most natural thing, and they were so adorable the entire time. I guess you could have possibly given it to Chisato and Sora from Osake, but Moriko and Yuta, there is no couple that I've maybe seen in a romantic setting on an anime show that really meshed together as well as those two did. There are some where it feels forced. There are some where they try a little too hard to make it campy, whereas in this one, it does feel very natural. And being a gamer myself, being able to see the lack of social skill, it really does remind me of what like I was back in high school trying to find my footing at that point. And Yuta, even though he's like in his mid-20s, I think at this point, or almost, because I think Moriko, I think she said she's like 33 or something. just watching both of them, it's just like, wow, like I can see so much of my own startings as, you know, somebody trying to get a relationship. I could really see a lot of that in me, and it made it so relatable and it made it so realistic. Whereas a lot of times it just comes off as they love each other so much that it's like it's that one couple that you see in when you're in high school that are just a little too public with themselves. But this time, it just everything works. There's nothing that's off-putting, and it really helps because that's what sells the show. You want to see those two get together, and whenever they're together, they mesh so perfectly that you can't not root for them. Quickly going through best or the hottest guy. Well, technically, Hidari does it count? I don't really care if you think it does or not. Hidari is a male, and it worked perfectly just for that one shot. In terms of a girl, I'm gonna give that one to Satsuki from Konohana. This one was actually a lot tougher than it could have been. In the end, I kind of went with her just because I think she was also that kind of attractiveness that you didn't necessarily get thrown in your face. Because I mean, I could have just given this to Gina from Garo because that would have been easy. But Sasuke also has that. She blends it in with also just being very elegant and very good looking on top of that. Where Gina's literally just like just big boobs and big ass. Like she's the stereotypical like, you know, it's just eye candy. Whereas Satsuki's able to do both. In terms of the secret hot girl, Micah gets that easily because anytime she ends up being put in a situation, because I mean she looks like just your standard cute girl, right? And then when the show goes out of its way to be a little more like, whether it's a swimsuit episode, whether it's anytime that you see them changing, like they really bring Mike out into the forefront, and she blows you away every single time. I mean, I could have given this to possibly Ren from Konohana. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that really fell into it. I guess you could kind of give it to Miyako, but from Imuto. But at the end of the day, Micah was just the one that stands out like a sore thumb. Just because anytime that she's there, you're like, when the hell did you get this pretty? Speaking of pretty girl, the most beautiful girl in anime, I gave to Sober Chisato, where she still has the ponytail and glasses, and she's usually in her business suit. That's like the key of elegant, like super adorable, cute, pretty, like whatever adjective you want to use. She fell into that category very easily. You know, obviously drunk Shisato was also really enjoyable, but that's also when it kind of just delved into the silly and cute category, whereas when she's sober, she's very gorgeous. And you look at Sora being like the very almost girly looking guy that he is, you're thinking, man, like he hit the jackpot with her, you know, as being the guy who she's like one of the very few girls that you get her through just, you know, being able to make really good drinks. Apparently that's a thing. But yeah, no, she really stood out. We get to our last three awards then. So best male character. That one I didn't really have one that stood out. I mean, Itsuki had a good chance. He was very funny at times. He really brought the comedy out on that one. Sword had his moments, but I think at the end of the day, and even though it is kind of somewhat cheating because Hidari does disguise himself as a female the entire time, I think I have to give it to Hidari. Because what Hidari does for that show, when the show was already at a 10 out of 10 rating, what Hidari does is it takes it and brings it out into a possible 11 out of 10, a Spinal Tap rating. Because Hidari already, when Hidari comes into the fold, he just accentuates every other character that he's next to. He makes Miyu just completely go crazy because now she's like, oh my god, it's a trap. That just gives me so many more ideas for a story. It freaks the hell out of Micah, which, you know, Micah, when she's like, you know, all over the place freaking out over stuff, is that she's at her best. She pisses the hell off of the green-haired waiter the green-haired cook that I still can't remember his name because it's not going to happen until literally after I stop the broadcast. Dino does the same thing. He makes him freak out a lot. And then everybody else, like Kaho and Mafuyu, it's more just like, again, it's just more like, what? But when Hidari is always in a scene, just causes more trouble, makes everything funnier. and just the facial reactions to that character end up just accentuating everything around it and making the show twice as good as it already is. So, I mean, I have to give that one to Hidari. In terms of the best female character, that one is really difficult. There are so many really good characters. Like, I could list off right off the bat Kino, Maika, Satsuki, Miyako, Nayuta for the moments that she does. Even like girls like Ren and Chisato, and there's so many really good ones. And the more I think about it, the more that I just take Satsuki from Konohana and think, you know what, if there's any character that I just really couldn't take my eyes off of, and I felt like didn't go over the top and didn't, you know, Maika is really good, but Maika has her moments where she's a little too weird. Moriko has her moments, but she's still a bit of aloof. Even Sophie from Gar was a really good character, but there's still those moments where it's like, I could do without you for a couple of minutes. Satsuki, I never had a problem with. She's that good version of Tsundere where it's not annoying. And she's also like a very dependable and very, I guess, solid ground, a very well-grounded woman. She's the kind of character that I think you look at and you think, you know, that's the kind of characters we need as more central characters, because Yuzu, as the main character of that show, really makes things a little too silly and gets a little too cry happy all the time, whereas Satsuki is very much one that balances her out. And Satsuki is what brings that show back to a level ground and makes the episode good whenever she's there. She's very much like Hidari, but when Hidari just makes everything funnier, Satsuki brings things back down when they need to be brought back down to that, you know, level grounded, level headed, very relaxing, and just normal-ish for anime. And I think that she stands out as being a character among everybody else, where this season had a lot of really good female characters. She's the one that just edges them out just slightly for me. And then last but not least, as I said before, Blend S is the best show from the entire season. There's no show that made me laugh harder. There is no show that I look forward to more every week. There is no show that had better cast overall. Every character has their role. Every character has their gimmick, and they all mesh perfectly. The comedy is phenomenal, and there isn't anything that completely throws the episode off. There's no sudden, like, backstory that's a little depressing. There really isn't any depression in that show. And any show that finally doesn't try to be sad at any point, I will happily take and just open my arms up for, because I'm so sick and tired of comedy shows that decide, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take an episode and we're going to push the comedy away for a little bit for you guys. What we're going to do is we're going to take a character that you thought was this really happy-go-lucky, and we're going to bring them down a peg and give them this really dark backstory that makes you be like, oh man, what an amazing person they are to be so funny with such a tragic backstory. I don't like that. It doesn't add anything to me. I just want to watch my comedy shows and laugh. I don't need a dark backstory. I don't need depressing, sad stuff to balance it. In a comedy setting like Blend S, I don't ever want to see that. And Blend S is one of those few shows that does that without compromise. They're just funny, they're just wacky, and they're okay with that. And that is why it's possibly my favorite comedy anime that I've ever watched. It's up there with a show like FLCL that's just weird as shit, and I laughed hysterically over. I put it next to shows like Infinite Stratos, which is my secret guilty pleasure. I put it up with shows like Hellsing, which is my favorite action. Erased is one of my favorite mysteries. I put up Blend S as my favorite comedy right now. I may go back and maybe find another one that I like a little bit better. Maybe even next season when I watch shows, I'll find something better. But as of right now, I don't think there is a better comedy that I've ever watched than Blend S. And that is why it is my best show of this season, because there's no show that even comes close to being as good as that show was this season. So that being said, that's probably going to do it. I mean, I'm going to close off by just saying, you know, I'm looking forward a little bit to next season. There really isn't a lot that I know I'm going to watch. I know I'm obviously going to keep watching Garo. The only show that I'm guaranteed to watch because I know it's going to be on Crunchyroll is going to be the second season of Dagashi Kashi. And unfortunately, that show started to get a little old by the time that first season ended, but now they're bringing in another character to kind of offset things. So maybe that show is able to get back to what made me like it so much. And then also just give me more candy that I want to go buy in Japan when I ever visit. I might end up giving the Card Captor show a shot. I don't think I'll like it. I think I'll probably watch one episode and be like, yeah, no, this isn't for me. But I'm curious just because that's a show that I watched way, way back when I was younger. That was like Sailor Moon Pokemon era for me. The only other show that if Crunchyroll gets it, because I don't think they've officially announced to have it, it's because it was on Funimation this first season, is the second season of Overlord. That show is a show that I will definitely watch at some point, but if it's not on Crunchyroll, it won't be on my usual weekly list. But other than that, like I've looked at the list for shows for the winter season. There isn't anything that stands out compared to all the other ones that I'm already like set to watch. There's a couple of shows that I'm definitely going to put on the list, but it seems like it's going to be a lot like of what this season was, where I just ended up looking at the main cover image, looking at the bio of it, the show, or the synopsis, I should say. And I'm like, okay, that looks interesting. I'll give that an episode a shot. And that's kind of what I did this season because I wanted to do something different. I spent way too much time beforehand just watching previews of everything, trying to know as much as I could. Now I want to go in blind because I want to be able to discover shows that I wouldn't have watched. And Code Realize was an example of that, where it's a show that I probably wouldn't have touched seeing that it was a shoujo. But I gave it a shot. I did finish it. I may not have liked it as much as I wanted to, but I still ended up enjoying something about it. Same with Black Clover. I knew it was a shonen show that I usually don't like, and sure enough, I didn't like, but I gave it a shot because I'm like, whatever, I'll go in blind. It sounds like it might be interesting. And I think it's better that way, watching like that, rather than knowing everything I could know and then making a conscious decision, because there were shows that I might have taken off my list that could have ended up being really good and I just never watched. There's always that possibility. So anyway, with that being said, thanks for watching the VOD on this. I did stream this privately so I could just record this. I'm hoping at some point to figure out how to get some time together to properly do videos like this again, or even, just have people that I can shoot the shit with, because talking for an hour and a half is quite painful because now I'm parched as shit. So that being said, I'm going to stop it now before I spend another 10 to 15 minutes talking about nothing. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe for all the other content that I'm planning on making. I don't know when more podcasts are coming, but it is definitely not something that was a one and done. So thanks for watching, and we will see you during the winter.